Hello and welcome. This is Paul Sandhu. There is a theory that has been kicking around for a while called the simulation theory. And what it posits is that the universe or creation is actually a computer simulation in which all that we see with our eyes, whether it's the trees, water, mountains, animals, and even the people like ourselves, we are simply computer programs. And this is a simulation. Like, you can have computer simulations. We have all types of computer simulations that somebody writes. Okay, somebody programs it so that we can view the simulation on our computers. So what we are told is that what we are living in is a much more sophisticated sophisticated simulation. Now, this video that I just played for you with the whale in the gym, it is basically that technology has evolved, let's say, greatly over the past 30, 40 years. Even like personal computers are only just over like 20 years old. And it is not, I would say, even till the mid 90s or later that everybody started having a computer in their home. Okay, so computers, as personal computers, are very new, but the speed at which this technology has advanced has been really phenomenal. I remember back in 1994 when I bought my first computer, it was, I think, a Pentium 3 or Pentium 4 processor, and it had, I'm not sure how many, it had something like 8 megabytes of RAM and a 420 megabyte hard drive, you know, and with that, that was all the processing power that it had. And now, we talk about RAM and gigabytes and storage space and terabytes, and it just keeps on increasing exponentially. So the processing power of computers has increased greatly, which has led to this, what we look at, these holographic simulations or these holographic technologies in which very realistic holograms can be created, which if the technology keeps advancing enough, we will really be able to create anything, basically, man, animals, etc., that will be really be indistinguishable from real, what we consider to be real people. Okay, and the difference being the holograms, they are computer code, basically, whereas what we consider to be matter is made apparently out of particles. Okay, so our bodies would be, say, made out of atoms, molecules, cells, etc. That's what a body would allegedly be made of. And we think that things which have solidity to it, which have what we might call substance, these things are real, whereas that which is generated through computer code or a computer program is virtual reality, as it is called. However, like if the hologram can be like in this hologram that you saw, it at least had visually, it had the visuals and the audio made it appear very real. Like the kids in the gym, they're gasping because they think there's a whale that's flying through their gym in all this water, and in fact there is no water and there is no whale. Now, if this whale and this water could actually be given some solidity, what is called like touchability, then how would you be able to distinguish it from what we consider to be real objects? And this has, of course, been the theme of many movies, especially the Matrix movies, which has explored this idea that not only is it possible, but the reality actually may be that we ourselves are computer generated programs. Okay, so this theory is out there. It is getting more and more, it is gaining more prominence, and more people are leaning towards this as that this is the true reality, that everything is basically based on computer coding, on math equations, on formulas, not on atoms and molecules and what we consider to be matter. So my interest in this subject is that, well, one thing, it is an interesting subject, but secondly, I mean, I am truly interested in what we consider to be reality, and in that pursuit of that understanding, I want to compare this simulation theory to the information that we find in the Bible to see, if the Bible would support such an idea or it should be rejected outright. So if you do a search on YouTube, you will find like dozens or maybe hundreds of videos, maybe even more, on the simulation theory or the holographic universe, and basically subjects that deal with the idea that our existence is in cyberspace as computer programs, not in physical space as objects made out of matter. So I have chosen one of these videos. It's called the simulation hypotheses, and I'm going to, take some clips from this video, and then I'm going to essentially give you my observation and what the information that we are being given, and compare it to the information that's in the Bible.
Is reality real? Or could we be living in a sophisticated simulation? Could the universe be more like a dream than we ever imagined?
Remember, you are the dreamer. You build this world.
How can science help us answer these questions? Welcome to the simulation hypothesis.
The clips that you just saw were from the movies The Truman Show, Inception, and Contact. All these movies deal with the topic of simulated or virtual reality, which people perceive to be the real world.
Have you ever had a dream, Neo, that you were so sure was real? What if you were unable to wake from that dream? How would you know the difference between the dream world and the real world?
What if you woke up one day and discovered that everything you've always taken for granted is not what it seems at all? What you thought was reality is actually a simulation, a very complex, sophisticated illusion that you live inside of. Even solid matter itself is no more real than, say, a rock that you would pick up in a dream. Are we really living in a simulation?
The Matrix is everywhere. It is all around us. Even now, in this very room. You can see it when you look out your window or when you turn on your television.
The simulation hypothesis is not really that new. It goes back more than 100 years, and philosophically perhaps, more than to Plato's dream world, etc., back couple of thousand years or more. However, the reason that this has become a field of inquiry, which many people who consider themselves to be scientists and even philosophers are engaged in, is because traditionally, up until the 19th century anyhow, physics was a study of the physical world, and it was assumed that all that we see, all that exists, is made out of particles of atoms, molecules, etc. But soon it turned out that as scientists, as instruments became advancing, as experimentation became more sophisticated, they came to the realization that this model of physics, where it's based on particles or physical objects, you could say, out of which everything exists, that the fundamental building blocks, let's say, as we were told, that atoms and molecules and all that, it soon came to be realized that that was not the case. Okay, that the nature of what we observe cannot be explained using such sciences. And this is the reason why the growth of these sciences, such as quantum physics, for example, which tries to explain the failures of traditional physics in explaining anything at all. And that is why they have come up with these hypotheses, such as the simulation hypothesis, which basically tells us that everything that we are living in a computer, in a reality that seems to be three-dimensional, but as a matter of fact, it is being created, it is being computer generated. So in reality, it does not. Reality does not really exist or consist of particles, but rather of bits and bytes, as in a computer programming, and that would include man himself.
Plato versus Democritus? What do these guys have to do with anything? I thought we were talking about science, not philosophy. Well, all scientific inquiries are based on one or more philosophical positions. So let's quickly go over some of the philosophical arguments that different scientific approaches are built upon. Ancient Greek philosophers already had the basic idea of the atom, and they used this idea to help them explain how reality worked. Out of all their various conversations, several very different views emerged. These views are best expressed in the works of Plato and Democritus. Democritus built his philosophy of materialism on the assumption that atoms are eternal, indestructible, and are the only things that really exist. All other things exist, said Democritus, only because they are composed of atoms. Following this logic leads you to believe that consciousness is a product of physical processes in the brain. This is the philosophical assumption that Isaac Newton, Charles Darwin, and most Western scientists until very recently built their work on.
The question that is being asked here is, what is a person? What is consciousness? What makes a person a person? Is it our bodies? A brain is an organ of the body. So is our consciousness what makes us aware, what makes us intelligent to be able to process information? Is that a product of some material organs, or is it something that is ethereal, not made out of matters or particles or atoms as the Democritus proposed? See, most people are not aware of how much of modern science, especially physics, is a philosophy that dates all the way back to the time of the Greeks and even further back to the Egyptians and the Babylonians. It is what used to be called alchemy. Okay, it is something which is it is basically based on ancient wizardry. Okay, what used to be the realm of wizards or magic is now called physics. Wizards like Gandalf and Saruman from the Lord of the Rings movies could well have been physicists. There is not much difference in the craft that they practiced and that which is practiced by modern scientists, so-called.
Plato built his philosophy of idealism on the assumption that the basic underlying structure of everything isn't the atom, but abstract mental forms that determine an object's properties. Plato believed that ideas are more fundamental than objects. For instance, a perfect or ideal sphere exists only as an abstract mental form or idea. Any sphere that we see in the world, like a basketball, is simply an approximation of the ideal sphere. By following this logic, you come to believe that consciousness is primary and gives rise to all physical matter and process. In other words, everything begins with consciousness, and there is a mind behind what we experience as physical matter. In much the same way that when you dream, your mind is creating a physical experience for you while you sleep. As you can see, these philosophies are mutually exclusive and are in fact opposites. Both cannot be true. Either mind gives rise to matter, or matter gives rise to mind. It's a very, very old debate.
The question that is being asked here, is the chicken or the egg argument, which one came first? Basically, what they are saying is one camp would say that matter came first, and then came the mind. The other one says mind came first, and then came matter. What is a mind? A mind is but a storehouse and a processor of information. So essentially, we can ask the question, what came first, information or what we perceive to be matter? And furthermore, is matter itself just information, or is it particles? See, it is in answering the question of our own existence as to what we are and how we exist that we can understand everything about the world that we exist in. Therefore, these questions, people have thought and about these things. They have given it some thought, and they've thought about these matters for a very, very long time, going back thousands of years. And like I said, these two main hypotheses have developed. One is that everything consists of matter, and if there was no matter, there would be no consciousness, and there would be no person. And the other one, of course, is that consciousness is everything, and matter is merely a projection of this consciousness, which, in a nutshell, is something that would be posited by the simulation theory. The question really is, do we consist of matter, of physical particles like atoms that have weight and mass, that have what we consider to be substance, or do we consist of information? Are we like bits and bytes, as in a computer program, like what you're looking at the screen? It does not consist of atoms or molecules. It consists of bits of data. So is that what we are, or are we physical matter?
He took the two opposing views, one being materialism, that our universe is entirely physical, exists in and of itself, and needs nothing outside of it to explain it, and the other being the simulation hypothesis, that our universe exists as a virtual construct and depends on information processing happening outside of space-time. Dr. Whitworth looked at all the facts that have been gathered from experimental results and asked which view better fits these facts. After a thorough analysis, his conclusion was that the data much better fits the simulation hypothesis.
Right now, we're inside a computer program?
Scientifically, our universe simply makes more sense when viewed as a virtual construct emerging from consciousness, rather than simply matter existing independently of the mind.
This isn't real.
What is real? How do you define real?
See, this question actually is a very good question as to what is real. And most people in this hypnotic, hallucinogenic world of the matrix that we live in, they are kept busy with their daily grind, and then through amusements like sports, stupid TV shows, soap operas, silly music, rock concerts, etc., etc., which are not going to add even an iota of benefit, spiritual or otherwise, to their life, but actually it is going to consume their time. And time is the most precious commodity we have in this life, because we have a very finite amount of it, and we are supposed to spend it on educating and learning, not on amusements. And the word muse means to think. When you put an A in front of it, it becomes a negative. It means unthinking. So if you think that, this state of the world, which is an unthinking, uninformed state of most people, it is by design. And that is the matrix, which I have discussed in the past, will discuss in the future, but it's not the topic of this video. So reality, as earlier pointed out through these Greek philosophers, either it's matter, which is made out of particles, or it is, as Plato said, ideas made out of words. Okay? Ideas are words. So those are the two options. And in this video that I'm playing for you, this simulation theory, simulation hypothesis video, the link to which is in the description, I'm going to play another clip from it. And what you will observe in here, well, let's play the clip and then I will give you my observations. One observation I want to make here is that we are conditioned to believe that that which is real is only that which can be touched, or that which we can sense, okay? So we are very sensual people, that we are controlled by our senses, and what is apparent to our senses, what we can see, what we can hear, what we can touch, those five senses that we are taught, that's what we consider to be real. However, the senses, or the body, the senses are directly related to the body, okay? And this is what we call the natural. The Bible, this person that is controlled by the senses is called natural. And there is a distinction made between that which is natural and that which is spiritual, the spiritual being the higher being and the natural being the lower being. Okay, so there is our consciousness, for example, which is not sensual. It doesn't come from our senses, and it is not something that is made out of matter or depends on the body. It is independent of the body, and that is what we are trying to establish here: is what is this consciousness? And if the person is the consciousness, and perhaps a little bit more, but not necessarily the body, then what should we consider to be real? For example, when God made Adam in Genesis chapter 2, he formed his body of the dust of the ground, we are told. So the body was present, but the body did not come alive until God breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. He animated him, and this being became a living soul. He became a conscious, self-aware person. So we can understand that the body existed before the person was placed in that body. So there is a very major distinction between the body, that which we see, touch, feel, etc., and between the person. And that is the real issue here, is what is the real person? Now again, we can read in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 18, while we look not at things which are seen, but the things which are not seen, for the things which are seen are temporal, but the things which are not seen are eternal. So here a comparison is made between temporal and eternal, and temporal means something that exists in time. It has a temporary existence, such as our body, and it is, as a matter of fact, telling us everything that we can see with our eyes, which we can sense, is only temporary. But there is something that which is eternal, and that's what we are trying to determine here. What is it that is eternal? And that which is eternal, is that what we call the soul? And if so, what is the soul? And then what exactly is it? What is it constituted of? Is it constituted of atoms, matter, or is it constituted of words, a language? That is the whole basis of this simulation theory. However, if it can be proven that the Bible does have a version of this simulation theory, it will become apparent that it is quite different than, for example, this video called the simulation hypothesis, which promotes the quantum physics version of simulation theory, which is very much different than what we find in the Bible.
The analysis starts at the beginning, with the Big Bang. This well-established cosmological model demonstrates that space-time was created by a single event billions of years ago and expanded into what we see around us today. Nearly all scientists agree that our universe began to exist at one point in the distant past. From the materialist view that our universe is all there is, as an objective, independent reality, the fact that the Big Bang came from nothing is very hard to explain. How could everything come from nothing? But if you look at the universe as a virtual construct, the Big Bang model works perfectly. Virtual worlds always begin with an information influx from a zero state, since they need to initially boot up. Every time a computer game starts up, a Big Bang occurs from the perspective of the game. From inside the virtual world itself, the creation always comes from nothing, because before it boots up, there is no space or time as defined by the rules of that virtual world.
See, this regrettably is what passes for science these days. This person, on the one hand, he says, when you have the materialist version of the Big Bang, it is not impossible to explain how everything came out of nothing. And then he says, oh no, but we can explain it through this simulation theory that, simulations can exist because the computer, before it is booted up, the simulation did not exist. Now, where this argument is, asinine in my opinion is, it's the same question. If the Big Bang came from nothing, the Big Bang people say that, there was basically nothing and then there was something. Is that not the same thing of this simulation that you're telling us? That before there was nothing and then this simulation just sprang up of itself? Now, in the case of simulations, it's very, very easy to prove that they are basically a computer programming, that there has to be a programmer who programmed the simulation, otherwise, and somebody who made the computer. Okay? The simulation just didn't create itself, and the computer just didn't create itself. So, to make this argument that, the simulation theory can explain reality as springing up out of nothing it's just as asinine and mindless as the Big Bang theory. Okay? It's no different whatsoever. And the purpose of these things, okay, let's just get down to the nitty gritty. Both the Big Bang and the simulation theory from the quantum physics point of view is to prove, basically, to try and explain existence, to try and explain creation without a creator. Just as the Big Bang denies God and says, yeah, it just happened by itself. This version of simulation theory, based on quantum physics, it also denies the creator, that there has to be, if we are talking about a program, there has to be a programmer that must come first before there can be any program. So any person that is genuinely searching for truth, or any real scientist, if they do come to this conclusion that this is actually a computer simulation, a program that we are living in, then the next question will be, who is the programmer? Not try to go about trying to say that there is no programmer. That is not science. That is not logic. That is not reason. That is not intelligence. Okay. So if they keep insisting on something, that we need to think that there can be nobody higher, nobody greater than us, are they really searching for truth? Are they really out there to inquire about our existence in reality? Or their whole sole purpose mainly is just to disprove God, and that's it. But if there is a God who did all this, whether he made it out of atoms or molecules or matter, or he made it using a computer software and a computer programming, then as a real searcher for the meaning of our existence, I think that has to be the starting point. Everything points towards that there is somebody, because we see design, we see intelligence, we see an underlying code in everything that exists, including ourselves. For example, they tell us there's DNA that defines us. So then, is it not a logical question to say, okay, if DNA defines me, who is it that wrote this definition? So why is it that whenever we encounter anybody that calls themselves a person of science, their motivation seems to be deny God, deny God, deny God. Okay, let's do everything we possibly can to disprove there is a creator. I mean, there's almost like you can sense this panic in these people, that if somehow they end up arriving at the conclusion that there is a God, that their whole existence, they'll just kind of evaporate and disappear, or something like that will happen. But if that is the truth, what's so wrong about that? Why be so afraid about it? That doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. When I look at everything that exists, including things that are man-made and things that are not man-made, anything that is man-made, I understand, there has to be a maker, like the house I'm sitting in. Somebody built this. It just didn't come out of nowhere. So whether this house is made out of bricks and mortar, or it's made out of a computer program, like a simulation, is not the question. The question is, who is the builder? In the case of matter, who is the one that built the bricks and mortars out of which everything exists? And if it is a computer program, who is it that wrote the language or the software that defines everything that exists? That is, to me, the most logical question any real person of science can ask. And if they're not asking that question, then you can bet your life that there is an agenda. And that agenda is to deny the existence of God, to try and disprove the existence of God, not to try to reach the truth, no matter where it may lead.
Okay, for the sake of argument, let's say the data does fit the simulation hypothesis better than it fits materialism. That's all well and good. But is there any solid evidence of computer programming in nature? It seems there is.
So you're saying as you dig deeper, you find computer code writ in the fabric of the cosmos.
Into the equations that we want to use to describe the cosmos, yes.
Computer code.
Computer code, strings of bits of ones and zeros.
So are you saying we are all just, there's some entity that programmed the universe and we're just expressions of their code?
Some of these scientists, they do come to the correct conclusion that there is what you might call a coding or a programming that underlies existence, okay? And they do ask the question, like Neil deGrasse Tyson here asking the question, is there an entity that has programmed the universe, okay? And of course, the most logical answer to that would be God, that God has done it. But why is it then that they never propose that answer, that they always run around looking for any answer, any solution that will exclude God? But again, it comes down to if God is the programmer, or if there is a higher intelligence and a higher power that is, even if you don't say that is the God of the Bible, okay? Even if you even if you want to deny that, but how is it possible to deny that there has to be somebody that actually did the programming? Like this computer I'm working on, I'm looking at some images, I'm looking at videos as you are. These have not arrived at your computer screen without somebody actually doing the work to make these things visible and audible to you. Okay, if nobody created this program, that like myself, I'm creating this program for you to watch. And if I had not created it, there would be no program to watch. So in this case of this program, I am the programmer that is presenting this information to you in a way that can be shared and you can then watch it. But wouldn't it be like kind of lunatic for you to conclude that this program just materialized out of nowhere with no intelligence and then no encoder or programmer behind it to make it possible? See, where these theories such as the simulation theory originate is from a deep desire that we human beings have, of understanding our existence. That question is at the back of our minds in some cases, but at the forefront of the mind of many people. Who are we? Where have we come from? Why do we exist? Is there a purpose to our existence? All these questions are tied into it, and that's why theories have been forwarded since time immemorial to explain our existence. And one, of course, the most commonly accepted and understood, and belief in God, a creator, has been prevalent throughout our history, that there is higher power or powers that have existed that we owe our existence to. Okay, and that is again that question, it really comes to the forefront in case the simulation theory has any basis in fact, because if it is a program, then there has to be a programmer or programmers. And instead of, even once we have determined that our existence is indeed a simulation or a program, and then the next question, the obvious one, is who is the programmer? And one more thing, if existence, as I showed you before, that the body is, unless it's animated, it really is not the person, okay? So then it comes down to this understanding that is it matter that is real, or is it that which is immaterial? Is it that which is ethereal that is in fact reality? Like the Bible said, things that can be seen are temporal, but things that cannot be seen are eternal. So that is the real question, okay? Is what is reality? And if it happens to be a computer program, then that is the reality. It is the reality. And it would also be false to call it a simulation, because it is not a simulation of reality. It is actually the reality, okay? And that does not diminish us in any way, shape, or form. That's the understanding I want to convey to you here, that if that happens to be the reality, then it doesn't make us any less conscious or beings of a conscience than if we were made out of atoms or molecules or anything like that. As a matter of fact, I think that being the consciousness itself is not made out of matter, then the reality of the program is much more real than that of matter, which is, as we all know, is something that deteriorates and that disappears in a very short period of time. So then that which is real, that which is eternal would be the consciousness. It would be the what we call the soul, because it transcends the existence of the body or of matter, which is only temporary.
Instant correspondence can be seen between two particles that are separated by unlimited distance in space, and this only makes sense if the world is a virtual construct. In a virtual world, distance doesn't limit correspondence, since all points in a simulation are equidistant with respect to the source of the simulation. For example, in a computer game, all points on the screen are at equal distance with respect to the processor, and the same effect can be seen in our world. If our universe is a simulation projected onto a three-dimensional screen, then its processor would be equidistant to all points in the universe. Non-locality, one of the biggest problems in physics, is easily solved by the simulation hypothesis. Space seems to be an illusion created by the virtual construct.
So what they are saying here is that if this model is indeed correct, then the whole model of space, matter, atoms, planets, galaxies, made out of dust, gases, etc., it just kind of goes out the window, because all it is a computer program. Now, however, let's be a little bit careful here, because all these guys, when they, especially on YouTube, you'll watch a lot of videos and they say this has been proven, this has been demonstrated, this experiment has shown, and all those kind of things. In the end, almost all of those experiments, like the double slit experiment, they are fraudulent. They do not prove anything, but it does support their theory. That's why they want us to believe that these experiments have been proven. Just like Einstein's theories have apparently been proven by these discovery of these gravitational waves, which you really, when you get down to it, you understand how ridiculous the whole concept is. But that's another story. What I'm trying to say here is that, let's keep this as a hypothesis, that this is a hypothesis. And if it was actually a fact, and it had been proven to be a fact, that we are computer simulations or computer programs, then, particle physics should cease to exist. Then, they shouldn't be building CERN and looking for the God particle and all these kind of things. Physicists shouldn't be still teaching, about atoms and molecules and all that kind of stuff, which you will in any physics class. Nobody has come out and said that. And therefore, we have to keep it in mind that this is all still a hypothesis. But what the hypothesis is saying is that, on a computer screen, you can have two galaxies, for example, that are two planets, hypothetical planets or whatever, that they want to show you, or 2 points in space separated by 1 billion light years, okay? But in a computer, you can travel that distance in 0 time, because where the actual location is not dependent upon physical space. It is just inside the processor, like you said, is just a software encoding. So there is nothing really that separates them in space. So space itself is a construct, like you said. It is not what we perceive it to be.
But even stranger than space being an illusion is what quantum physics tells us about matter itself.
Just a word of caution here that in this video, which is a very strong promotion of quantum theory, these guys, quantum physics shows us, that this example or this analogy that they're going to give you of a character in a video game, it has nothing whatsoever to do with quantum physics. This analogy can be made if we never heard the name quantum physics, or if the field of quantum physics never existed, because, you're just comparing it to fictional or virtual characters as opposed to characters that we perceive to be real, which analogy, again, has nothing whatsoever to do with quantum physics.
If I were a character in a computer game that were so advanced that I were actually conscious and I started exploring my video game world, it would actually feel to me like it was made of real solid objects, made of physical stuff. Yet if I started studying, as the curious physicist that I am, the properties of this stuff, the equations by which things move and the equations that give the stuff its properties, I would discover eventually that all these properties were mathematical. The mathematical properties that the programmer had actually put into the software that describes everything.
The server that's creating you is not in your reality frame. It's outside. If you're Sims, that computer is non-physical to you. What's physical to you is your Sims world.
So what this person is telling us is that basically, like a character in a video game, we are actually inside some type of simulation, but the computer or the processor that is actually running the simulation is outside of our reality. Just as the characters in a video game, they are inside the game, you see them on your TV screen, but they are not in what we perceive to be the real world, okay, which you, the player, are separated from the characters. There is a fundamental difference between the player and the characters in the game.
Max Planck famously said, "There is no matter as such. All matter originates and exists only by virtue of a force. We must assume behind this force the existence of a conscious and intelligent mind. This mind is the matrix of all matter."
This mind that Max Planck spoke about, most people would call this mind God, okay? But regardless of what name we give the mind or the intelligence that would be necessary to create any type of programming, the fact remains that whether actually everything consists of particles or it consists of information, it doesn't matter. To me, it doesn't matter. There has to be somebody who has created it. But especially in regards to the simulation theory, when it comes to the matter of programming, that is an obvious sign of intelligence, computation, of writing computer code, then it has to be an intelligence or a mind, as Max Planck put it. And that mind is what I would call God. But that of course is up to the individual to decide what they want to call it. But the fact remains that there has to be an intelligence, a mind, a person, a creator that has created this simulation. Otherwise, it would not exist. One more important factor we need to consider is that in any programming, the complexity of video games, for example, from the original video games, which was just like one ball bouncing between two walls or something, we have come a long, long ways here where whole universes are being created now using computer code. So what has happened here is that, first of all, the sophistication of the equations has increased exponentially, but secondly, the processing power that is required to bring these video games to make them look realistic has also increased exponentially. Okay, now, if this universe that we look at, the cosmos, is also a simulation, as this theory is hypothesizing, then I would have to say that the processor, okay, let's call him God, would have to have infinite or near infinite processing power, number one. Number two, with any computer, what is required is that you can load it with software, but unless you energize that software, you supply electricity to it, power to it, you would never be able to execute what the software is intended to do. Same thing here. So number one, you would need near infinite intelligence or near infinite processing power, processing capability, let's say. But secondly, you would also need near infinite energy, because this simulation, if it is one, it is just way too massive for all the computers in our world and any worlds to be able to execute, okay? So the energy requirements and both the intelligence requirements, they would have to be on a scale which is like by factors of like thousands perhaps, or maybe more than anything that we have, or millions or billions maybe even, considering the complexity of just our world and the number of, like, for example, life forms that we have on it, which are near infinite, that the processing and the energy requirements would have to be near infinite as well.
One of the hottest ideas in cosmology is known as the holographic principle. It's the idea that our three-dimensional universe is emerging from 2D information. That is, three-dimensional objects are composed of information spread out on a two-dimensional surface, in the same way that a hologram produces a three-dimensional image from two-dimensional information. The holographic principle tells us something very surprising. It says that our ideas of volume, and in a sense, the world, might be a kind of illusion.
So advances in video game technologies, even like 3D movies, etc., holographic technologies, touchable holograms, also the idea of having sensory input using computers. There are companies that are working on Amazon, for example, that when you're looking at something like a perfume online, you wouldn't just be able to see the bottle, you would actually be able to smell it, or you would be able to feel the fabric. These kind of things are all happening, okay? And when you do get to that point where real characters are no different, like in the movies like Total Recall, etc., that they are no different than that which has been generated by a computer, then it is very clear that what we believed to be real is actually a computer program. Now, let me add this caveat, which these guys they keep saying illusion. It is still not going to be an illusion. It is going to be real, but it is the very nature of reality that is being, which is the subject here. It is not whether something is real or not. It is whether it is what is it that makes it real. Is it like particles matter, or is it information, bits and bytes and data? the question is not whether a computer generated world or cosmos is possible or not. Even what we have in our world that man has created, as far as technology is concerned, would tell us that yes, it is 100% possible. So if there exists someone that has far greater processing power and knowledge, then to create something like our present world and the cosmos is not out of the realm of possibility. And at this moment in time, what I would like to do is I would like to introduce you. The reason I did this is to evaluate if such a possibility, or if the Bible would support such a hypothesis. Okay, because to me, if such is the nature of our reality, then there is only one person that is capable of doing it, and that person is God. So let me just outline the criteria that are necessary for our world and for creation to be what's called a computer simulation, and see if that criteria is met by the information that we read in the Bible. So these are the following 5 criteria. Number 1, everything that exists, that is created, must exist as a program, not as matter. Then the created programs exist inside of the creation, whereas the programmer or the creator alone is outside of it. The programmer possesses near infinite intelligence. This is number 3. The programmer possesses near infinite intelligence / processing power to write the near infinite variety of programs that we see in creation. Number 4, the programmer has access to near infinite amounts of energy to power the near infinite size and complexity of the simulation. And number 5, perception of three-dimensionality is actually a projection onto a two-dimensional surface, as the holographic principle postulates. So let's see if any of or all of these criteria are met by the information we read in the Bible. So in regards to the very first criteria, that everything exists as a program, not as matter, in the book of John, chapter 1, the Gospel of John, chapter 1, verse 1, we begin to read, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made." In Colossians chapter 1, verse 16, "For by him," meaning the Word, "were all things created, that are in heaven and that are in earth, visible and invisible, whether they be thrones or dominions or principalities or powers. All things were created by him and for him." In Hebrews chapter 11, verse 3, we read, "Through faith we understand that the worlds were framed by the word of God, so that things which are seen were not made out of things which do appear." In that video that I just showed you, where like those three-dimensional interaction was taking place between what looks like a three-dimensional chessboard, almost, with these checkers board with these bars rising up and down, and the ball falling on the phone and being moved, and it was all being done by a computer. Well, basically that was a software that was framing those objects. So as in the case of that video, where those bars, they are not made out of anything visible, because they are just a computer coding which does not have existence as matter. We are told in Hebrews 11, verse 3, that the worlds were framed by the word of God, so that the things which are seen were not made of things which do appear. So what does not appear? What does not appear is the underlying code, or the formula, or the equation that defines everything. But what we see is what that equation actually creates. Okay? So for example, on your video screen, if you're going to write a program for like a nice movie or something, people are going to see the people, they're going to see the action, they're going to see some romance, whatever. But what they will not see is the encoding. But the reality is that what they are seeing is actually encoding. What they're perceiving is people, places, automobiles, etc. And that is what we are being told here, that the things which we see are like, plants and trees and mountains and rivers and oceans and sky and clouds, etc. But there is something that they are actually made of, which we do not see with our eyes. And what is that? As we had just told, it is the word. And what would that be? That would, of course, have to be an encoding that actually defines what that thing is. The idea that God has programmed everything applies equally to the human body as well as to our consciousness, and also, more importantly, to conscience. Okay? For example, we can read in Psalm 139:16, Thine eyes did see my substance, yet being unperfect, and in thy book all my members were written, which in continuance were fashioned, while as yet there was none of them. See, this is, in thy book all my members are written. And of course, we know, like, what is the underlying structure of the human body is the DNA, which is a coding, which is a software programming, which is a language. There's a new technology called CRISPR, which I'll do a program on later. And this is a gene editing software. Basically, the computer interfaces with our genes and the DNA can be modified. So unless the computer language and the DNA language are the same, they will not be able to communicate. And therefore, that just proves beyond doubt that it is a computer coding. And again, the programmer, who is it? I know it's God, but then people who think that, all this encoding just happens itself, that is just not reasonable or an intelligent assumption. Furthermore, in regards to our consciousness, or our consciousness, it also tells us, for example, in Hebrews chapter 10, verse 16, this is the covenant that I will make with them after those days, saith the Lord. I will put my laws into their hearts, and in their minds will I write them. This idea again of writing, or programming of the mind, is right here, that he will be writing and programming the mind so that we have his consciousness. Moreover, in Hebrews 8, verse 10, we read, For this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, saith the Lord. I will put my laws into their mind and write them in their hearts. The heart is the conscience, the conscience, that's correct. The soul or the mind is the consciousness. The heart of the spirit is the conscience. So again, is the idea of programming our conscience to match his conscience. So the body programmed, the consciousness programmed, conscience programmed. So again, the idea of programming or writing, and this is very common in like the Eastern mindset, that it is written. They say it is written. It is written. Go to the Arab countries, go to Israel. This idea that it is written is it's just basically ingrained on their psyche. And I think this is the origin of that everything that exists has an underlying programming. Okay? It has an encoding. There is a language, which is, of course, a computer, a mathematical language that exists and that defines what that thing is, when the definer or the programmer, of course, is God.
The server that's creating you is not in your reality frame. It's outside. If you're Sims, that computer is non-physical to you. What's physical to you is your Sims world.
So what this physicist was telling us was that the simulations exist inside of the computer, but the simulator or the player is outside of it. So if we look at the book of Acts, in chapter 17, in verse 28, we read, For in him we live, meaning in God we live, move, and have our being. And what does that mean, have our being? It means our existence is inside of God, that outside of him we cannot exist. So if we are programs, as I just pointed out, that the Bible will indicate in regards to our bodies being programmed, our consciousness being programmed, our consciousness being programmed, and that program can exist only inside of God. Okay? So again, this would support what these simulation hypothesis people postulate, that the sim exists only inside of the computer as a program, cannot exist outside of it. So yes, on that count, yes, we do have something in the Bible that would conform criteria number 2. Okay, criteria number 3 is that the programmer would have to possess near infinite intelligence and processing power, both to write and to execute the infinite variety of programs, or at least the near infinite variety of programs that we see in creation. Even on our own earth alone, just a variety of animal and marine life and plants and everything that exists is so complex that it is near infinite in variety, and therefore the processing power and the intelligence that would be required to write such programs would have to be on a near infinite scale. So, what do we read in Psalm 147, verse 5? Great is our Lord and of great power. His understanding is infinite. So, it tells us that God does have infinite intelligence. So if this is a simulation, then God certainly possesses the knowledge and the understanding and the intelligence to write the programs that would have to be so complex that their complexity we cannot even begin to hint at. The only reason man cannot create such a simulation as our universe is because it's far too complex. We just don't have the intelligence to write the programs. The code that would be required would be so complex that there is absolutely no way that we can even begin to do that. But somebody whose understanding or intelligence is infinite would certainly be capable of doing it. So, does the Bible have information that will support criteria number 3? I would again have to say yes, it does. Okay, moving on to the 4th criteria. The programmer has to have access to near infinite amounts of energies to power the near infinite size and complexity of the simulation of this cosmos. What we see, it is like so big, the energy requirements to maintain such a simulation would have to be on a scale that is just off the charts. So what do we read? In Revelation chapter 19, verse 6, we can read, "And I heard as it were a voice of a great multitude, and as the voice of many waters, and as the voice of many thunderings, saying, Alleluia, for the Lord God omnipotent reigneth." What does that mean, omnipotent? It means all powerful. What do we read in Revelation 1:8? "I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the ending, saith the Lord, which is, and which was, and which is to come, the Almighty." What does the Almighty mean? The one that has all might or all power. In Hebrews chapter 4, verse 12, "For the word of God is quick and powerful." What is that word powerful? The word powerful is the Greek word energis, from which we get the English word energy. So what it is telling us that the word of God, which we read in John 1:1, is the word of God is God. So what this is telling us that God is living energy. And finally, in Matthew chapter 28:18, Jesus, who is God in the flesh, said, "And Jesus came and spoke unto them, saying, All power is given unto me in heaven and in earth." He said, "All power is given unto me in heaven and in earth." So it seems to me that there is absolutely no shortage of power where God is concerned to power such a simulation if it is indeed a fact.
One of the hottest ideas in cosmology is known as the holographic principle. It's the idea that our three-dimensional universe is emerging from 2D information. That is, three-dimensional objects are composed of information spread out on a two-dimensional surface, in the same way that a hologram produces a three-dimensional image from two-dimensional information. The holographic principle tells us something very surprising. It says that our ideas of volume, and in a sense, the world, might be a kind of illusion.
Okay, the 5th criteria for the simulation hypothesis and the holographic principle to be reality is that the perception of three-dimensionality is actually a projection onto a two-dimensional surface. Now, again, the Bible does suggest that what we perceive as three-dimensional actually has more of a factual basis in two-dimensionality. For example, although there are numerous examples of this in the Bible, I'm going to quote two here. In Isaiah chapter 34, verse 4, we read, "And all the host of heaven shall be dissolved, and the heaven shall be rolled together as a scroll." And in Revelation chapter 6, verse 14, "And the heaven departed as a scroll when it is rolled together." So here we are being told, the heavens, of course, they seem very three-dimensional to us. But here the picture that is being painted is of a two-dimensional scroll. So not only is it two-dimensional, the scroll itself, when that comparison is being made to a scroll is what? Scroll is something that has writing on it, which again takes us back to the idea of programming. So the idea which we just saw in that little video that I just played here with that Princess Leia and the hologram, and they are telling us, what you think is three-dimensional, it is actually just a computer program that has been projected onto a two-dimensional surface, as for example your computer screen. So in reality it is not three-dimensional. So this, when we read information such as about the scroll or the heavens being stretched out as a curtain, it has a very strong connotations of this very idea that what we perceive to be three-dimensional is actually a projection onto a two-dimensional surface, which basically is the screen of our mind. Okay, so the fifth criteria, does the Bible meet it and support it? I would again have to conclude that it does. So in conclusion, all 4 or 5 of the criteria that I believe are necessary for the simulation hypothesis and the holographic principle to be a reality are supported by the Bible. So are we living in a simulation? Are we all sentient computer programs? I have my opinion on it, but it is up to you to come to that understanding. But what you need to come to the greater understanding is, what does it mean when it says that everything, that God is the Word of God is God, and that everything was made by the Word of God, okay? These are again subjects that are really not taught in the church, so we have to delve into them and to study them. If they were not important, especially the topic of the Word, it would not be in the Bible, but it is a very, very fundamental and important topic, so we do need to study it. We do need to discuss it. Now, what I have given you here is that, yes, the Bible does support the simulation hypothesis, but that doesn't mean that, even if we are simulations, that we are unreal. Perhaps that is the very nature of reality. That is the only way something can exist, is as an encoding of programming. Okay? But if consciousness itself is a programming, and our conscience is a programming, what more does it take to make a person real? Anything that has a consciousness and a conscience is a person. Okay? The body is not the person. The body is the least important part of the equation. So can we conclude that a computer-generated sentient program with a consciousness can be as real as a person that is born as we see in this world? I would have to say yes. All right, and again we are reminding you of that scripture from 2 Corinthians, that the things which are seen are temporal, whereas things that are not seen, what is not seen? Like that example that guy was giving, that in a video game, for example, what you are seeing is, three-dimensional objects, but what they in reality are a computer code. Okay, so what we don't see is the programming. We do not see the encoding, just like in our body. Do you see your DNA? Do you see the programming that defines your hand or your foot or your nose or your ears? No, we don't. We look at the ear. We see the ears. We see the hands. We see the feet. We see the nose. We see the eyes. Okay? We don't see the encoding, but it's there. So is that not perhaps true, that everything that exists has an encoding in it? And if it does, this is where I will differ. I will separate. I'll go into a diametrically opposed path from all these other quantum physics, simulation theory people that are trying to suggest that all this has just happened by itself, like the Big Bang, or that the programmer, or we are the programmers, or that is some kind of aliens, or it's like our future progeny that are projecting us back on as young ancestor simulations and such things. I would have to say that if there is a programmer, his name is God or Jehovah, the great self-existent one who had to have existed before anything else can exist, whether it's made of matter or it's made of information. Okay? Pay attention to information. It's a very important topic in the Bible. We ourselves are information. We are not, molecules and atoms and cells. That is not what makes us us. What makes us a person is information. So I think there's been a lot of good information that has been presented here, and I hope that you will research and study it and share with me your findings, because I'm always looking to, learn more on this subject and any subject that relates to our existence, because what more, endeavor or field of understanding can we pursue than that of our own existence and our own purpose. So thank you for listening. This is Paul Sandhu.
Where am I? In the village. What do you want? Information. Whose side are you on? That would be telling. We want information. 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 You won't get it. By hook or by crook, we will.
Looking around at the world as it is, sometimes it's hard to go on. The world takes your soul and hides it away, and it's so hard to start again and take it back, though it's so easy to let it go. He who wants to learn from me, let him take up his cross and follow me, and follow me. Living today in the world as it is, sometimes it's hard to believe. People laugh in your face when you try to be pure, and it's so hard to start again and believe, not 'cause someone tells you to, but simply because you believe. Happy are they, the pure of heart, they shall see God, they shall see God, they shall see God. And so I start again, and every time I start again, it's for the first time. You can pour me out like water, my peace I leave to you, peace which the world